morning, everybody. Thank you for having us today. What a privilege to follow Sam. Amazing initiatives that he's working on, and I hope that you're all able to contribute to those in the coming year. So as Marvin said, I'm from the Artemis Group, and I'm working with Hawk PI, and many of the attorneys I actually know here I got to already speak with that we've already helped coach along in their clinical testing needs. Because time is so short, this presentation is printed in your book. I'm going to advance these slides down to something that I feel is a little bit more pertinent so that we can talk about how it relates to your particular offices. You see the slide here. It says when your client describes a situation or a behavior of a spouse or a partner, these slides are going to help guide what kind of testing may or may not be available. Normally, by the time litigation begins, your client or the client on the other side of the aisle has stopped the negative behavior that started the litigation in the first place. Whether they were abusing drugs, they were abusing alcohol, they had drugs in the home that are endangering the child, that behavior usually ceases or suspends. We're able to reach back into these donors' histories as far back as 18 months to document what drugs or alcohol they may have been using. Unfortunately, most attorneys throughout Georgia, and it's not just a Georgia issue, it's everywhere that I go to speak about this, you're relying on laboratories like Quest and LabCorp to facilitate your drug and alcohol testing. Those are workplace drug tests. They have no business in family law. The cutoff levels of those tests are exceedingly high, normally 300 nanograms per milliliter. You're missing a whole lot of data between 0 and 300. And that's why I wanted to come and talk with you today to give you some additional options so you can reach out to partners that may be able to help you for the benefit of the child. Most of these slides you can go ahead and read on your own about what kind of drugs are out there, their symptoms, the detection windows, and what your options are. But I wanted to kind of start with alcohol testing here. You really have several options for alcohol. We have a 3-3-3 plan. If you have someone in a zero tolerance program, the breath alcohol is going to be the best option for testing for your client, especially if we have a supervised visitation situation. What do you do if it's beyond 3 hours? The next is a urine specimen that can detect alcohol for up to a 3-day period. Again, great for visitation situations. Those results are generally available within 48 hours. Once litigation starts and we have a spouse claiming that the other spouse is abusing alcohol, well, that behavior normally, again, will taper. How do we get that data? Hair follicle specimens and finger and toenail specimens are going to become your best friends. We can start evaluating alcohol abuse going back as early as 3 weeks, once the hair and the keratin start to grow out, for as long as an 18-month period. We have a test available to you now called phosphatidyldiethanol. We just call it PEth for short. The more you drink, the more PEth your body makes. The more PEth you make, it's indicative of binge drinking. Binge drinking can be identified over a 6-week period of time. I can tell you how many alcoholic beverages you've had for the past 6 weeks. These tests are very difficult to adulterate. You hear people bringing fake urine specimens or sending in ringers to do their testing. If you have the right partner and you're asking specifically for the right test, you can't adulterate a blood test or taking something directly out of your vein or out of a finger prick. I've had attorneys request this testing from the judge for a court order, and it can happen right in the courtroom. If you have the right partner, they'll come and facilitate the court order right there as you're waiting. Blood spot technology has been around for a very long time, but attorneys don't know it's available. So this is one of the most advanced tests available for identifying alcohol abuse for family law attorneys. The breath alcohol, again, is going to be your shorter window. The 80-hour is going to be a urine-based test. Then you start to get into hair follicle and toenail testing, and then you can have the binge alcohol testing as well. For your drug testing options, hair follicle testing is going to provide what we consider historical data. As your hair grows out, the drug is trapped into the follicle of your hair as your body metabolizes that drug out. There are some things that can adulterate those tests, so you want to make sure you're using a specialized boutique laboratory that can bypass any of those adulterations. When you're writing your drug testing court orders, if you need assistance, reach out to a partner that specializes in clinical testing to help you write that order in order to identify which particular laboratory is going to be able to serve you best. If we're concerned about adulteration in a hair follicle specimen, a very stable medium for drug and alcohol testing is your finger and toenails. As your fingernails are nourished by your bloodstream and the keratin fiber in your nail grows out, that drug is trapped in the nail. You cannot file it out, you can't paint it out, you can't use nail polish remover to get it out. It is just going to be there. Donors are not expecting to walk in for a drug test and have the clinician tell them to take off their socks and shoes. They're expecting to give a urine-based test. They're expecting that they're going to bring that fake urine with them and they're going to pass just like they always have. Having the right partner available to you to harvest the proper specimen is really in the best interest of the child. Once we're getting to a positive drug test, then we can make a plan for how we're going to deal with that particular family member going forward. Is it a randomization program? Is it ongoing testing? Is it referral to a medical evaluation situation? Urine-based testing, no. People think it's blood. It's really not. What's happening in your system right now is going to metabolize out through your kidneys, and for a long time we're going to find it in urine. Prescription drug abuse in the state of Georgia is a big problem. I'm considered a subject matter expert for local physicians on that topic. We do a tremendous amount of drug testing on patients for physicians, probably 3,000 to 4,000 patients a year. It's a big problem. How long are these drugs going to stay in your system? Cocaine in general metabolizes into benzodiglockanine and is only available in urine for a 24-hour period. So in order for you to find out if someone is actually using cocaine, you may need to consider testing via a different medium, whether it's hair, fingernails, and so on and so forth. Saliva, we generally don't like saliva just because the half-life of the drug is not bioavailable in saliva the way it is in urine. And then finger and toenails are going to provide that historical data. When we talk about historical data, that means I'm not going to be able to tell you from a fingernail specimen what your donor did today. Today is going to be a urine specimen. I'm going to be able to tell you what they did 3 weeks ago, 7 weeks ago, 6 months ago, 18 months ago, depending on the health of the donor. We recently had a case within the past year out of Atlanta that the medical evaluator, based on the overall health of the donor, kidney and renal function, that the specimen was considered bioavailable for the past 18 months, establishing that this mother had been using drugs from that period of time, and it really impacted the way the custody came out. These are the tests, these urine-based tests that you're probably most familiar with. These 10-panel tests and 5-panel tests. When I get calls from attorneys on a daily basis, this is what they're used to hearing because this is what Quest and LabCorp offers. These tests are very good tests depending on what you're looking for, but you want to reach out to a clinician, somebody with some kind of toxicology background that can give you some kind of guidance to make a recommendation. We recently had a case that the donor, divorce case out of Cobb County, that's where I'm based. The spouse was a compounding pharmacist, has a lot of access to a variety of prescription medications, and that was the grounds for the divorce, was drug abuse. He had beaten every test that had been given to him over a 6-month period. He came into our office after having a consultation with a clinician, and we ran a medical professional test on him that looked for 85 different compounded medications. Needless to say, that donor did fail that test. So you're not going to go to the cardiologist to get your oil changed. You want to go to someone that has some experience in these areas. So don't just rely on Quest and LabCorp. Do your homework and realize that there's boutique labs out there that really can service your accounts better. We have some reasonable suspicion testing available. Again, there are partners out there that can really help you. You have that client who says, well, my husband is using drugs in the car, it's potentially around my child, but I can't prove it. There are resources for what we call wipe and spray drug assessments out there, where they will come and they will test any residue left in your home, in your vehicle, in your office, and tell you what drugs have actually been present. It's very, very useful. That evidence is all collected and photographed and would be readily available to you. You don't just have to rely on what your client is telling you, because somewhere between what they're telling you and what the other side is saying lies the truth, and having good clinical testing is really where it's at. Relying on private investigators that are bringing you evidence, and you need a way to back it up to make it court admissible, tying those things together through realistic laboratory testing is really your best option. This is very interesting, especially following Sam. Child guard testing. Children in general are not drug users. They're usually victims of domestic violence, child abuse, substance abuse in the home. They are not the direct drug user. However, more often than not, we're seeing children that are testing positive from an environmental aspect for drugs. There is now testing available that can be done on your client's children that will test for methamphetamine abuse, cocaine abuse, marijuana abuse, and it's all based on the residue that's left in the home. This residue collects in the child's fingernails, toenails, and in their hair. So if you have a parent that's concerned about these kind of things, you want to make sure that they understand that they have testing available to them. Because time is so very short, I'm going to skip over the rest of the child guard testing. I always want to make a nod to Judge Kelly down here in the Brunswick area. He's always concerned about nicotine testing, especially with the child safety law that was passed last February. Now you cannot smoke in a vehicle with a child that's under 15 years of age. How do you prove it? In custody, nicotine is becoming a bigger and bigger issue. You certainly can test these children for nicotine exposure, and there are urine tests available to prove that these children are being exposed unnecessarily. Fingernail testing, again, highly stable medium for all kinds of drugs and alcohol. Randomized testing is available. You just have to have a reliable resource to use it. There are certain laws, and you guys are more familiar with those than I am with regard to expectation of privacy, but we are able to have partner laboratories run these tests anonymously, which would help facilitate the need for a court-ordered drug test. Infidelity testing, I'm going to try to zip through this, not realizing how much time I took. Semen detection testing, DNA plus Y chromosome. I'm sure a lot of you have had 5 or 6 people come up to me and say, my client brought me 5 pairs of women's underwear. What do I do with those? It's kind of funny, but we actually have a resource for that. We're able to harvest specimens directly out of those garments and compare them to a control specimen to rule that donor in or out that was the spouse, establishing multiple male donors or multiple female donors to support that the spouse was cheating. It really saves a lot of time in the litigation process when you're able to bring that evidence directly to them and say, well, I have 5 unknown male DNA specimens on your lady's undergarments. Where did those come from? Because they didn't come from the husband. Most of this can be done within a 10-day period. You just have to have the right partner to be able to facilitate those tests. So next time your client brings you some item, make sure it's stored securely in a paper bag, wear some gloves, and then call the right partner to be able to help facilitate some testing. If you're curious about types of case studies, I have a whole pile of case studies for drug and alcohol infidelity testing, alcohol testing, nicotine testing, and how that testing can be applied in your office up here. I left some blue pieces of material telling you about drug testing assessments that are available and what kind of laboratories you can certainly call. I'll be here for the next hour if you have any questions or you have a specific case that you would like to talk about. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I hope we get to see you out in the hallway during the next break period.